Hey everyone, welcome to my channel Coding Clean. Today, in this short video tutorial, we are going to look at three types of loops in C++. Let's begin our introduction with the while loop. What is a while loop? A while loop executes a block of statement repeatedly as long as a certain condition is true or a specified condition is true. So basically what it does, it executes a statement or a block of statements more than one time based on the condition. So let me write a program and explain how to use it and understand the syntax of this particular structure. So I'm going to first declare a variable. I'm going to call it counter. I'm going to initialize it with the value 1. And here comes the syntax of the while loop. You type while keyword all in small letter, then pair of parentheses, and here we specify the condition. So for example, if I want to execute some block 5 times, I can type the condition as counter is less than or equal to 5. As long as the value of the counter variable is less than or equal to 5, I want to execute the body of the while loop. And this is the body of the while loop. The opening curly bracket and the closing curly bracket specifies the body of the while loop. And then we execute some statements within this block. So I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to just print on screen the value of the variable counter. And then we have to increment the value of the counter by 1. For example, I can type the postfix expression. What it does, basically, it's similar as if I were to write counter equals to, or assignment operator, counter plus 1. This operation is exactly the same as counter plus plus. This is called the postfix operation. And what it does is that it adds 1 to the existing value of counter. Whatever is the current value of counter, we want to add 1 to it and then reassign it to the counter. So we actually update the value of the counter. But how do we update it? We add 1 to the value of the counter and put it back in counter, right? I'm going to go with this short version, which does exactly the same thing, right? So here is the while keyword, then the pair of parentheses, and within the parentheses, we specify the condition. And the condition is simple. While this condition is true, while the value of the counter is less than or equal to 5, execute this block, right? So the first time we enter the while loop, the value of the counter will be 1 because we initialized it to 1. And this condition will evaluate to true because the value of the counter is 1, and when 1 is less than or equal to 5, then we will execute this block, right? And in this block, the first statement is to display the value of the counter or print the value of the counter on the console. And then we increment the value of the counter by 1. Once we increment the value, we will go back and check this condition again for the updated value of counter, which is 2 now. So 2 is less than or equal to 5. Yes. We execute this statement. And again, we add 1 to the value of counter and counter becomes 3. Then we check the condition again. 3 less than or equal to 5. Yes. Go ahead and see out this statement. And then we add 1 to the value of counter and 3 becomes 4. So the value of the counter is 4. 4 less than or equal to 5. Yes. Then do again. And similarly, we update the value of the counter by 1 and 4 becomes 1. Now the current value of the counter is 5. 5 is less than or equal to 5. Yes, it is not less than, but again, this operator is a combined operator. It says the less than or equality. So yes, 5 equals to 5. This condition is true. We will execute this statement and add 1 to the value of counter, and counter becomes 6 now. Now 6 less than or equal to 5? No. So we will stop executing the body and we will execute any statement after the while loop. So I'm going to just come here and put an endl. It simply means insert a blank line because endl moves the cursor to the next line. So if I save changes and compile the code and execute this program, just to show you the output, and as you can see on screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we executed these two statements 5 times. Without the while loop, we would have typed cout 5 times. So if you don't use the while loop, right, and you want to do exactly the same thing, see what happens. I'm going to just remove this now, and we would have done something like cout counter endl, then again increment the value of counter plus plus, then print again. So there is a lot of typing, and other than typing, if you were to change something, let me show you that. Cout counter. This is how we would have done without a while loop, remember. So counter plus plus again, and then cout counter endl. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we have to do it one more time. Counter plus plus, and then cout counter endl. So see, we are doing a lot of work without using the while loop. So save changes, and if I compile and run it again, we are going to see exactly the same output, but this time we have written a lot of code. We are repeating a lot of statement. And in software engineering and development, we often use a principle which is called DRY, D-R-Y. That means do not repeat yourself. And repeat yourself means they do not duplicate the code again and again. If you find yourself in a situation where you think, I'm doing the same thing again and again, then you have to rethink about this code and do something with it. So without the while loop, we would have done this much. And remember, what if we want to execute these statements 100 times, and you would have typed all these statements 100 times. And remember, with the help of the while loop, all you have to do is to come here and say while counter is less than or equal to 5, as we did before. Put the brackets, and I'm going to just copy these 2 lines and move it inside the while loop, right? And see how easy it is now. And remember, for example, if we were to execute these statements 100 times, all you have to do is to just come here and change this value to 100. And if I save changes, we would see 100 times this particular output. So if I compile the code again and execute it again, as you can see, 100. And if I just scroll up, it begins with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 30. And then if I scroll down, you're going to see 100, right? So it's a powerful construct, and this is a while loop. Another type of loop we are going to look at is called the do while loop. So I'm going to change this to do while now. It's pretty much similar to the while loop, but in the do while, we check the condition at the end, not in the beginning, right? So I'm going to come here. The syntax for the do while is straightforward. You type do keyword, then the body of the loop, and then you check the condition at the end, right? This is the structure, right? And here goes the condition. So I'm going to say counter less than or equal to 5. Again, the same as with the while loop. And now I'm going to just come here and say cout counters endl. So we are doing the work before checking the condition. Remember, this is the difference. So I'm going to say counter plus plus. And what will happen, even if this condition is false for the first time, because we are outputting the value before checking the condition, it's going to work at least one time, even if the condition is false. So if I change this to 10, the value of the counter is 10. I come here, we enter this do while loop, we execute this statement, and 10 will be printed on screen. Then we increment the value of the counter by 1, so 10 becomes 11. And it says 11 is less than 5. No, the condition is false, even for the first time. But again, because we do the work first and check the condition later, this loop execute at least one time, even if the condition is false. So just remember this, right? I'm going to change it back to 1, save changes, and then recompile the code and execute the program, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I change it to, let's say 10, right? And remember that the condition says the value of counter is less than 5. No, it is not. 10 is greater than 5. It is not even equal to 5. It's not less than 5. It's greater than 5. So the condition is false. But if I run the program, you're going to still see the output, the value of counter 10. Sorry, let me just save the changes and then run the program, and it says 10, right? So this is the difference between a while loop and a do while loop. A while loop will only execute the block of statements if the condition is true. A do while loop does the same thing, but the condition is checked at the end of the loop. So the first time it will execute for sure, even if the condition is false. And for the rest of the cycles or iteration we call, they will check the condition and then will execute, right? So remember, the difference is that while completely dependent on the condition, and do while also does the same thing, but it will execute at least one time, even if the condition is false. The third type of loop is called a do while loop, a for loop. So let's see and type the for loop here. And the for loop is used, its definition is very interesting. It says that execute a block of statement for a specified number of times. It doesn't say the condition checking, though there is a condition checking. But if you know in advance that how many times do you want to execute the loop, for example, you have an array of size 100, so you already know the size of the array, and you want to access every element of the array. So use a for loop, right? So if you know before in the program in advance that I want to execute this block 10 times or 100 times or 20 times, whatever, then you use the for loop. For loop is very compact. Everything happens within the loop. We normally initialize the variable in the while and the do while outside the body of the loop, and the for says I'm going to put it all together. So the syntax for the for loop is you type for in small letters, then these pair of parentheses, then you initialize the variable within a for loop, and then you say counter less than equal to 5 and counter plus plus. So the initialization, then the condition checking, remember the semicolons are important, and then the increment all happens in one line. And the flow is different. Flow is exactly like the while and the do while, right? So for example, what happens is that I'm going to just simply say cout counter and L, and let me use this small tool. The first thing is that this particular operation will happen only one time. Initialization will happen only one time, right? Remember, just once. When we enter the loop, this statement will be executed and that's it. The counter is initialized with the value 1. Then the condition will be checked, right? So this is the first thing, the first step, whatever you can call it. This is the second step, right? And it is not the third step, right? The third step is to check the condition, and if the condition is true, then execute the code, right? This is the third. And the fourth is once you execute the statement, then go and increment the value of the counter. So this is the fourth, right? The flow is really important. This happens only once. When we enter the loop, it will not be done again. Then we check the condition. If the condition is true, we execute this body of the loop, right? And then after that, we go back to the increment and increase the value of the counter by 1. So 1 becomes 2. Initial value was 1. Now it's 2. And then again, 2 is less than or equal to 5. Yes. If true, then again execute this block. So it's kind of a loop, remember? You see, loop is this thing, right? It's called a loop. Loop in English means this thing. You do something again and again and again, right? It's a kind of cycle, right? So this is a loop, right? So this is a for loop, right? So if I just remove everything, what happens, this thing happens once, then the condition is checked, right? If the condition is true, then go and execute this statement, then increment the value, then check the condition again. If true, again do this thing, and we are kind of in a loop. As long as this condition is true, when the value of the counter becomes 6 less than 5, no, then we will go out of the for loop and execute any statement after the for loop. I think that's set. Let me just close everything and save changes and recompile this code and execute the program to show you the output of this program. And it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I was to execute this loop 100 times or 50 times, I would have just changed this to 50, counter resistance equal to 50. I would have saved changes and I would have run the program. And as you can see, it executes 50 times, right? So that's it about the while, do while, and for loop. We can use these loops in different ways. For example, for count down, let me just type here for count down loop. We use the same loop but with different conditions. So we say counter, or let me call it, for example, x this in this case, and x is less than or equal to 5 and x plus plus. This is going to do exactly the same thing as before. But if you were to count down and you want to, for example, say that I want this kind of output, like there will be 5 and then 4 and then 3 and then 2 then 1. This is countdown. That means that the initial value of the x will be 5, and then at each cycle or iteration it's going to decrement by 1, not increment, decrement by 1. So it's very simple. Once you figure out the logic, it's easy. So I'm going to initialize it with 5 initially. I'm going to change the condition that as long as it is greater than or equal to 1, right, decrement the value of counter by 1, not increment, decrement, and then do this thing, right? So count x and del, right? And I'm going to put quite a few new lines character just to have a space between the first output and the second output. And I'm also going to just see out count down for loop, just giving it a title, right? So let's compile the code. No error, no warning. Let's run it. And this was the first loop, right? The first loop was a normal for loop. It executed from 1 up to 50. And look at the second countdown loop. It begins with 5 because initial value of x was 5. Then we check the condition, 5 greater than 1, yes, do this thing, and then decrement the value of 5 by 1, so it becomes 4. 4 greater than 1, yes. 3 greater than 1, yes. 2 greater than 1, yes. 1 greater than or equal to 1, yes. 0 greater than 1, no. 0 equal to 1, no. So we terminate the loop, right? So we see 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So that's it for the 3 types of loops in C++. Watch this video again and again. In case if you don't understand something, leave a comment in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Happy coding.